evening. I have a new piece of equipment and it's Wednesday and it's time for the next update on our lace knit along. Tonight, we are going to insert a lifeline. Now, have you guys been working on your lace? Have you got through at least one repeat of the lace pattern? Tonight, I'm going to insert a lifeline and then we're going to carry on to round 2 and the second iteration of the lace pattern. So let me get out the materials and we'll look it over and we'll talk about it. So I've got my pattern, which is getting a little worse for the wear. I have my pattern. I have my stitch repeat. Remember, we did a lace round and then knit around for this repeat. Oh, and I found my lifeline. I have my lifeline piece of string. I have a spare one because I thought I'd lost my lifeline. I have my knitting here that includes the garter stitch rounds and one round of the lace work. I also have, really importantly, for this situation, a darning needle. Now it just so happens that the pair of needles that I ended up working with do not have a hole right after the needle tip, or it's a lifeline hole where I could thread my lifeline through that hole and just knit around, and that would just deposit that lifeline right into the knitting and I would be good to go. I don't have that on my needles, so I'm going to have to thread my lifeline onto my needle and run it through the stitches that are around the needles that are in place right now. And I'm going to flip this around with my new tripod-y thing that I traveled with, and I'm going to show you how to insert that lifeline. All right, first of all, let's look at how this stitch design should work. You should have a straight line of holes, and they kind of wiggle back and forth. Don't worry about that. But you have a straight line of holes, and then you have arrows, or what looks like arrows, beside each of those holes. And then a straight line, and then an arrow. And that goes all the way around your cowl. This cowl should also not be twisted in any spot, and I've managed to not do that as well. Uh-oh, and now I've dropped a stitch, so let's get this back on here. I've ended my last row with a knit row, and that has happened. The other thing I have to do is I've just noticed that my row or my round counter has fallen off, so I got to figure out where that belongs. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. It goes right before this one. And that probably happened when that stitch came off, because normally I go to my row counter and I take one stitch beyond it so that it doesn't get lost. Now the next thing I'm going to do is take my spare piece of yarn or my lifeline and I'm going to thread it onto a darning needle. And what we're going to do, I'm going to go ahead and let this stay off for now so I don't have to fight it. I'm going to yank this needle up tight and I'm going to begin threading my lifeline through the stitches, just right through the stitches that are on my needle. In between that one, in between that one, and pull. I've made this rather long so that I'm sure that it will get all the way around my knitting without having to gather it at all. So I can get through 3 of those. Pull. Make sure not to pull too tight. You don't want to pull this through. You also want to make sure that you are leaving this on your needle. So I'm going to go through this one. Oops, let's make sure I'm in that one. And this one. And this one. Needless to say, if your needles have a lifeline hole, it's to your advantage. All right, I'm going to finish doing this and not talk, and we'll get it done. I've just circled this around my ball of yarn, so I need to get that out. And if you see, this is just like putting stitches on hold. I pulled each, with my needle, I pulled each stitch off the working needles in the purl-wise ways, as if I was going to purl stitch. And I just distributed them along a piece of waste yarn. In this case, it's yarn. Could be thread, and I do have another one that's thread. And it right now is just sitting loose on this. The reason I'm showing you this first before I put the needles back on is this is what you'll use this for. If you make a mistake in this next section, you can just pull out your needles, rip your project back, and it will stop here, which is why this is called a lifeline. Now, before I can proceed, I have to put my needles back in. I would not have had to do this if I had had the hole in the needle, because the hole in a lifeline hole on a set of needles, Chaogoo has them, and I believe Hiyahiya has. I believe that this is, I don't know what brand this is, I'll figure it out, but there'd be a little hole there, and I could have threaded my yarn through that. Instead, I have to take this with 2 steps, and now go in with my working needles and pick up the stitches. And this is what you would do if you had to work back, or you had to rip back your project and pick up where you left off. So I'm going to go in right next to this lifeline and pick up the stitches right around it, also purl-wise. I'm going to pick these up until I'm all the way around and ready to proceed. Now I ended this row. Also, don't forget to pick up your stitch markers as well. I ended this row with the knit round, or the resting row. So my next row after this lifeline is going to be row 1, or the bottom of this chart. And I will proceed on with that. So let me, I'm going to put you on pause while I pick up these stitches. And we'll pick up the next lace repeat. All right, we're around. I have a lifeline. I tied a little bow at either end just so it won't work its way back through without me intending to it. I'm now at position 0 to start my row. I've moved my tape down to row 1, and I am going to knit round 2 of our stitch design. So let's get my needles in position. We have a knit 1, yarn over, slip, slip, knit, and I'm basically just ignoring this lifeline. It's sitting in here. Be a little careful to leave it down. Don't let it get caught up in your knitting, especially this lace row you're doing. Slip, slip, knit. Don't knit it in, but see how it's just sort of sticking down there? It's staying down there, and when I'm done with this project, I will pull it out. You can just pull it right back out. If it happens to get caught just a little bit in anything, you can very carefully remove it with a pair of scissors. Oh, look, my stitch marker's caught in the lifeline. That is a problem. Is that going to be a problem? I think it is going to be a problem. We're going to have to fix that because I've connected each of these lifelines in here. Let's think about this. We're going to have to work on that. What do you think? Is this going to be a problem or not? I think it is. I think I was supposed to avoid my stitch markers and I didn't. So we'll go back to the drawing board, put the lifeline in, avoid the stitch markers, go under the stitch markers. I wasn't thinking about that because now my stitch markers are caught in here. I know what I'll do. I'm going to be lazy. I'm going to let this stitch marker drop. I'll be able to pull it out later, and I'll just position a new one because I have plenty in my project. But this is going to be a situation where, don't be like Tina. Don't put your lifeline through your stitch markers. It should go under your stitch markers. So now I have new stitch markers I'm going to add in. I'm going to let those old ones float. I'll be able to retrieve them when I'm all done and keep on knitting. All right, note, do not capture the stitch markers with your lifeline. Repeat after me. Do not capture your stitch markers with the Lifeline. You'd think I was a rookie at this, but I've been doing this a really long time. But I didn't even think about that as I was doing it. There we go. 1, 2, 3. Drop that stitch marker, put a new one in. Let's hope you're listening. Now look at, I've got this coming around. Let's get this over the needle. There, we want it out of the way. Knit 1, yarn over, slip, slip, knit. Remember, this is not caught in my lace. This is only caught with the caught in the Lifeline, and that Lifeline will come out, so it's fine. I'm just gonna have to sacrifice these stitch markers for a while. Get that Lifeline underneath. Back. This should be a slip, slip, knit, I think. Knit 1, yarn over, slip, slip, knit. No, that was correct. Knit 2. Yarn over, slip, slip, knit again. Reminder, keep your Lifeline out of the way. Okay, and then 1, 2, 3. Correct. 1, 2, 3. Stitch marker goes down. New stitch marker on. Okay. 1 yarn over, slip, slip, knit. Knit 2. Yarn over, slip, slip, knit. Knit 3. 1, 2, 3. Drop that stitch marker down, put up a new one. All right, I'm going to put this down for now because it is rather hard to do this in front of you. But the Lifeline, see how it's just staying down there? And again, the stitch markers will come out when I pull the Lifeline out. Don't make that mistake. But we're ready to go forward, and we have a secure line on your knitting that is the line where if you make any mistakes in this next section, you can rip it back. You can pull out your needles. Just quickly rip it back, wind it back up on the ball, and it will stop at that Lifeline. That's what a Lifeline's for. Well, it for me tonight. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to carry on doing our little beginner's lace knit along, make sure you subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, leave a comment. How's your project going? Are you working on this? Are you getting ready to work on this? What is your experience with lace knitting, and how is it going? Remember, did you note that mistake? Do not capture your stitch markers with your Lifeline. I'm kind of glad I made the mistake because, you know, it's a good reminder not to do that. Can it be solved? Absolutely it can be solved, because those stitch markers are only caught in that Lifeline. When I pull it out, they're going to come out. So as long as you've got plenty to use, you don't have to start that portion over. But what you do have, what that Lifeline is for, is it's a holding pattern, so that if you make a mistake further up, you can just pull out your needles, rip it back, and your mistake will stop at that line. You do not have to rip out the entire project. When we get through the next repeat, we'll put in another Lifeline, or we'll move that one, and we'll have 2 repeats that are perfect, and we have a hold place, so that even if we make a mistake after that, we don't have to rip back beyond that. All right, I'll see you next Wednesday for this, and I'll see you Saturday or Sunday for another installment from my trip to the Boston, New Hampshire, Maine area. And I'll just warn you, I went to a yarn store in Maine. Little teeny clip, but I'll show you what I bought. In the meantime, bye.